From the time I was very young, I knew what an airplane was. I wanted to fly. And when I was in my second year of college in 1940, I was able to get my private pilot's license through the civilian pilot training program. And then Pearl Harbor came along, and I determined that I was going to go into the Air Corps rather than fight on the ground. And so I joined the service at Gowan Field in Boise, Idaho, and went into the Air Force from there. Well, first of all, they put me into Vancouver Barracks, Washington, with a bunch of other aviation cadets to wait for an opening in the flight training, and that took about a month. And I learned how to peel potatoes and do a lot of other KP duties, plus a lot of close order drill. Then we were sent down to Santa Ana, California, where I was enrolled in the class of 43B, and went through pre-flight at Santa Ana, doing calisthenics and all sorts of ground school, meteorology and so forth. And then after leaving there, we went to Visalia, California for for the primary flight school. And I flew a little Ryan PT-22 there. And after 2 months, we went on to basic flying at Chico, California. Flew the BT-13, low-winged monoplane, and then on to Stockton, California, where I completed my advanced flying in twin engine and was commissioned as second lieutenant pilot in February 6, 1943. I really wasn't nervous. I don't believe I ever got nervous about that. I wanted to go into B-17s, but the Air Corps saw fit to send several of us to Avon Park, Florida, where we learned to fly the twin-engine medium bomber B26, also known as the Widowmaker and the Flying Prostitute and a few other names. And that's where I got my transition into B26s. I enjoyed the more powerful airplanes and what they do, and the little Porterfields that I flew in before were mighty small compared to, especially when I got into the basic trainers. They were big and powerful, and I really didn't know anything about the reputation of a B-26 until I got to Avon Park. They were losing quite a few of them, especially over at Tampa, McGill Field. They had a reputation of one a day in Tampa Bay there because the electric prop would go out and go into flat pitch, and the plane would nosedive right into the bay. They lost quite a few of them there. We didn't lose very many at Avon Park, but then they came through and modified the aircraft and put, I think it was 7 feet wingspan, increased the wingspan 7 feet, and improved the electric prop. And from then on, we had very few fatalities or crashes from aircraft failure. The main problem they had was maintenance. It was hard to keep us flying as much as we were and still keep the plane maintained. But we got through our transition and headed overseas. There were several of us in my class that we were put into replacement crews, and I was assigned as a co-pilot on a B26 with a crew, and we flew together for a while, and then flew on over the northern route through Presque Isle, Maine, to Labrador and Greenland and Iceland, and on over to Prestwick, Scotland, and then on to our new base down at Chelmsford, England. And we were a replacement crew down there with a B-26 group, 385th Bomb Group, 387th. And I flew as a co-pilot for several missions. Then in February of 1944, my pilot went on a mission as a replacement pilot, and he was shot down over the continent. And so then they made me a pilot, first pilot, and then I shared crews and various things to keep going. Oh, I was ready. I was ready for that. You can only sit in the co-pilot seat so long, and then you're ready to go on ahead. My first mission, I remember, we were heavily loaded, and I took off down that runway, and I signaled for the wheels to go up, and they told me afterwards from the tower that my plane settled back down and almost dug the props, almost dug the runway, but I was just too anxious, and it was fine from then on. I had a few close ones, bad ones, but nothing worth writing home about. Well, we worked together very well. We had a tail gunner and a radio operator and an engineer who took care of transferring fuel and so forth. And then we had a bombardier navigator. He would navigate too. But my bombardier and I had a very close relationship. We went out on weekend passes and so forth quite a bit, and did a lot of things together. But the rest of the crew, we just lived together and went about our own business. Each of the crew members were given a bicycle, and I did a lot of bicycling around England on those side roads and winding roads, and it was a very picturesque country and very friendly people. We got into London many times. I think I made it a practice of going by St. Paul's Cathedral. It's a beautiful cathedral, and I went by there just about every time I went to London. We were subject to a lot of bombings in London when we'd go in, and I stayed at called the Rainbow Club. It was an officers' Red Cross club where they'd give you lodging and you could eat there. Well, I was on the top floor of that hotel one night, and they had an air raid, and I didn't know it, but they had anti-aircraft guns on the roof of that Rainbow Club, and I was under the bed and nothing flashed when I heard all that shooting on the roof. But I came close there a couple of times to getting involved with one of those buzz bombs they had that came over and dropped on London. And but other than that, we went to movies, and that's about all. There wasn't a lot that we could do. I traveled around London quite a bit, but just on taxi cabs and buses, but that's all. One of the first things I started doing before we ever took off, I always prayed, because I wasn't a Christian yet, but I knew that I should pray about that mission. Well, I always did that, but the missions, we had a lot of what we called milk runs. We'd go over and not meet much enemy aircraft fire, anti-aircraft fire, and we'd drop our bombs and come on back home. But most of them had a lot of anti-aircraft fire. We were at an altitude of 13,000 feet, where the anti-aircraft was very accurate. And the worst thing for us was we'd see that big cloud of black smoke ahead of us, and we knew we had to fly through it, because that was where we were headed. And that was a little spooky at times, and we got hit a few times with shrapnel, but I don't think I was ever really scared to the point where I was ineffective. On one mission, we got out over the channel. We were headed for Boulogne, Germany, which was supposed to be a very heavily defended target, and all of a sudden, one of our props went out over the middle of the channel, and we had to turn back. And they had a rough time on that mission, but we missed it. It was aborted for us, and so I guess it was a good thing for us, but I missed it. One day we were over Paris, and we're just about to drop our bombs when all of a sudden the plane jumped up, a big loud explosion, and the cockpit filled with smoke. We had a anti-aircraft shell go off right underneath, and one engine went out. So I pulled out of formation immediately and headed back home. And that was spooky. We were going to have to go back all the way from Paris all alone. But there came a Spitfire, one of our escort planes, came right down on our right wing and waved to us. And he took us all the way to the coast, the best way, and we missed all the flak areas and got home safe. And but our plane had 45 holes in it, and a lot of the instruments were shot out, but we made it home in good shape. Thankful for that. Well, we knew that something was going on or going to come on because there was so much activity in the countryside. And on our own base, I came home from a mission on the 5th of June in the evening, and everybody was scooting all over the place. They were painting black and white stripes around our wings and the fuselage of all the airplanes, and the armament people were loading bombs. And at 3:30 in the morning, we were called out of bed and taken down for a quick breakfast, and then into the briefing room. And there they read Eisenhower's order of the day, saying that this is the day we'd been waiting for a long time, and they were going to invade the continent of Europe. And it was the largest single military operation in history, and that says a lot. And we were all excited. I honestly don't think I was afraid. I think I was too excited to be afraid. And the weather was horrible. It was kind of drizzle, and the clouds were right down on the deck. And but we had a target to hit, and we were going to go get it. We had to go up through the clouds, and then we had to bomb visually, so we had to come back down through the clouds. And when we broke out of the clouds at very low, I'd say it's 500 feet, but others say something else. But I saw all the English Channel was just full of boats of all descriptions. And the battleship Arkansas was back there in the background shooting off its 16-inch gun broadsides onto the beach. And, you know, there was just gunfire all over the place. And I didn't see any enemy aircraft. We were all, just about all you saw had black and white stripes around on the fuselage. So we headed into the target, dropped our bombs. I think we were loaded with 200-pound bombs. It was mainly to get rid of minefields and stuff on the beach.
Which beach?
And that we were.
Which beach were you on? I'm sorry. What beach?
Oh, we were on Utah Beach.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Omaha was the bad beach. Utah was first, then Omaha, then Sword, and a couple others.
So I'm sorry.
Yeah. And right in front of us, and just a little bit above, was a group of B-24s. And I'll never forget that one plane got a direct hit from an anti-aircraft gun. It exploded just into pieces. And I still can see that nose wheel come down just ahead of our formation. And that's the only hit I saw. We didn't get any hits. We got a lot of tracer bullets coming by our plane, but and we turned out over the peninsula, over Cherbourg Peninsula, and there we saw all these gliders that had come in ahead of us with their troops, and some of them were crashed, and others were pretty intact, but they were just all over the place. The Germans had put spikes or poles in the marshes, big poles all over the place. So those gliders, a lot of them landed on those things, and of course didn't do them any good at all. But it was quite a sight. We didn't have any opposition all the way over to across the peninsula, and then we got home, and not one of our planes had been hurt. I mean, nobody on the plane had been hurt, and but there were thousands of men on that ground that were just like us that never made it. Kind of a sobering thought. It was a real price for liberty. there was no difference in the anti-aircraft. We saw no enemy airplanes, and once Patton got going, it was hard to keep ahead of him. I think one of our groups bombed behind the lines. He had already gone ahead. But yeah, it changed. We had different targets, and we were after railroads and those buzz bomb sites and so forth. And it was, we could tell it was going to wind down. But there was a lot of it ahead yet. I flew 62 missions, and we call them 8 abortions, where we went out, didn't drop or didn't get over enemy territory and came on. So I was out 70 times. That sounds better than 62. But most of us were getting up, some short of 60, but one friend of mine had 72 missions, and others had even more. But most of us were right around 60, 65. And the flight surgeons were very considerate of us and very helpful. And they could tell when we were getting ready to, we were having troubles. So we didn't go home at all. We were there until we were through. When we first went over, they had a limit of 35 bombing missions for you, and then you could go home for a rest. But some of us got up pretty close to 35, and they weren't getting enough replacement crews to replace us, so they increased it to 50. And we got up close to 50, and then they made it 60. And I think I got up to around 57, and they changed that to unlimited. And they said that the flight surgeon will ground you when the time comes for you to go. And when I got to 62, why the flight surgeon took me aside and asked me if I thought it was about time I went home. I was having trouble sleeping, and I was nervous, but all right on the airplane, but I was nervous. And I said, I'm ready. So he put me in a little hospital there for a few days for examination, and then they sent me on home I went home on the Aquitania, at that time a large British passenger liner, first class service. We got off the ship in New York and got on the train after we had a T-bone steak dinner, and got on the train and went to Chicago. And then we changed trains there, I did, to go to Notice, Idaho. And just out of Chicago, I was walking down the train to the diner, and I didn't know it, but my sister was a WAC, and she had been stationed at MacDill Field, Tampa, Florida, and I didn't tell her that I was coming home. Mom knew I was going to come, so she told my sister, and my sister got a leave to come home about the same time. Well, I was going down toward that diner, and I saw a bunch of GIs and people up there in the middle of the car talking. and there was my sister. It was quite a reunion. And we got to get reacquainted. But then from that notice, I had a 15-day furlough, and I went down to Santa Monica, California, where they took all the paperwork to get me back on duty. I said, I want to get back to flying right away. And that night, I was talking to a bunch of fellows down in the room, and they were telling me what a good deal it was to go to a convalescent center for a rest. First, you get full flight pay and everything that went with it, and so I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea. So I went back upstairs to the sergeant and told him I'd like to change my request to go to a convalescent center. He said, fine, I don't blame you. So he gave me the choice of 3 different places, and one of them was Fort George Wright, Spokane. So I said, I'll take that, that's closer to home. So I got on the train and went up to Spokane. I got there on a Saturday afternoon, and I inquired there what church was available for a Baptist church, and they referred me to one down in downtown Spokane, and I decided to go there. So the next morning I got up and went down there, got there in time for Sunday school, and they showed me into a room, a classroom, and there was one chair available, and it was right beside Ivy. And I sat down, and we've never been separated. We were engaged about 6 weeks later, and then I had to go to Yuma, Arizona for a while and on duty, and then came back, and we were married on May 24th, 1945. After we were married in May, we got back to Yuma, Arizona together, and there my orders were waiting for me to go to Lake Charles, Louisiana, to learn to fly the new A26, a North American aircraft. So we waited a week and then headed out for for Lake Charles, Louisiana. And I was just getting ready to check out on the A26 when the war got to the point where they didn't need any more over in Japan, or in the Japanese theater. So they sent me up to Millville, New Jersey to fly tow target with B26 for P-47 pilots out off the Atlantic coast there. So we got in the car again and went up to Millville. We stayed there until the war's end. I think that was in September or something like that. And then my orders were sent to me to get to Fort Lewis for discharge. And we drove all the way across the United States, 9,900 miles I put on that car from the time we were married until we got home. And got to Fort Lewis, got my discharge, and I asked to be kept in the Air Corps Reserve. So they put me into the Air Corps Reserve, and I became active in that after the war. I didn't fly anymore. Went back to school and became a civil engineer. And my future with the Air Force was as an engineer. So I stayed in the reserve as an engineer, and finally got up to lieutenant colonel, and was retired from that. Well, one thing I left out in my tour of duty overseas, that's where I came to know the Lord as Savior. And that did shape my life from then on. And we raised our family in a Christian home, and it had a big bearing on our life from then on. What is the rest of that, you ask? My wife and I were able to take a tour of the beaches of Normandy. I think it was in about 2002, and it was quite an experience to see all those crosses, row on row, in the cemetery there on Normandy, and then to see the extent of the battlements, all that concrete and guns and things that the Germans had put in place. And it was a very well fortified area. Our troops hit the two worst beaches that they had, and they are certainly to be remembered and praised for all they did. They had a real job ahead of them. I wanted so badly to see what we had flown over, and no, it was a very exciting trip for me. I wasn't emotional about it. I was just very thankful to be able to see it. And but the cemetery was really quite a place. When I've read about the fatalities and so forth on that day, and that was brutal, terrible. So a friend of mine landed on Normandy 2 days after D-Day, and he got his eye shot out. So he was blind in one eye the rest of his life. Very good friend. And so a lot of them paid very dearly for it.